Right now, something extraordinary is hurtling through our solar system. Something that NASA and mainstream media outlets are downplaying, dismissing, and deliberately keeping from you. They're calling it just another comet, a routine interstellar visitor. Nothing to see here, folks. Move along. But what if I told you that this object, officially designated 3I ATLAS, is unlike anything we've ever encountered before? What if I told you that its behavior defies everything we thought we knew about comets? And what if I told you that the scientific community is actively suppressing the most disturbing questions about what this thing actually is? Stay with me, because by the end of this investigation, you're going to understand why the establishment doesn't want you asking these questions, why they're so desperate to label this as ordinary when everything about it screams extraordinary, and why some of the world's most respected scientists are risking their careers to tell you the truth. My name is Alex, and for the past 3 months, I've been diving deep into the 3I Atlas mystery. What I've uncovered will challenge everything you think you know about our place in the cosmos. This isn't just another space story. This is about deception, cover-ups, and the possibility that we're witnessing something that could change the course of human history. But first, let me give you the official story, the sanitized version they want you to believe. On July 1st, 2025, NASA's Atlas Survey telescope in Chile spotted what appeared to be just another dot of light moving against the background stars. Within days, astronomers realized they were looking at something unprecedented. This wasn't just any space rock. This was an interstellar visitor. Only the third confirmed object from outside our solar system ever detected. They gave it the boring designation 3I ATLAS. The establishment quickly rolled out their experts to reassure everyone. Just a comet, they said. Perfectly natural. Nothing unusual here. NASA issued carefully worded statements. The European Space Agency followed suit. Everything was under control. But here's what they're not telling you. Here's what you won't hear on the evening news or read in your typical science magazines. 3I Atlas isn't behaving like any comet we've ever seen. It's massive. Unimaginably massive. We're talking about an object that could be up to 12 miles across, weighing more than 33 billion tons. To put that in perspective, that's 1,000 to 1,000,000 times more massive than the previous interstellar visitors we've detected. This isn't just bigger than expected. It's so anomalously large that it breaks our understanding of how these objects should behave. And it's not just the size that's wrong. Everything about this object screams anomaly. Most comets have to get relatively close to the sun before they start showing activity. They need that solar radiation to heat up their icy surfaces and create the classic tail we associate with comets. But 3I Atlas was already active when it was discovered, even though it was far beyond Jupiter's orbit. It was glowing. It was creating its own light when it should have been a cold, dark chunk of ice and rock. The chemical composition is equally bizarre. When scientists analyzed the gases coming off this object, they found something unprecedented. Instead of the water vapor that dominates most comets, 3I Atlas is spewing out carbon dioxide at concentrations we've never seen before. And here's the kicker. The nickel-to-iron ratio in its emissions matches industrial alloys, not natural cosmic materials. Think about that for a moment. Industrial alloys. In an object that supposedly formed billions of years ago in another star system. But the establishment has explanations for everything, don't they? They always do. Unusual formation conditions, they say. Different stellar environments. Cosmic radiation over millions of years. There's always a reason. Always a way to explain away the impossible. Except when you start looking at the trajectory, things get even more suspicious. 3I Atlas didn't just randomly wander into our solar system from some arbitrary direction. Its path is aligned almost perfectly with the plane of our planetary system. The odds of this happening by chance? Less than 0.2%. But it gets worse. The timing of its arrival is optimized to pass near Mars, Venus, and Jupiter at precise intervals that maximize observation opportunities. The probability of this occurring naturally, 0.005%. These aren't just unlikely coincidences. These are astronomical impossibilities masquerading as natural phenomena. And then there's the connection that nobody wants to talk about, the connection that should terrify anyone paying attention. In 1977, astronomer Jerry Ayman detected the most famous unexplained radio signal in history, the WOW signal. For 72 seconds, a powerful transmission from deep space bombarded Earth with a pattern that couldn't be explained by any known natural phenomenon. Ayman was so stunned that he wrote "Wow" next to the data printout, giving the signal its name. For nearly 50 years, scientists have speculated about the origin of that signal. Dozens of theories, hundreds of research papers, no satisfactory explanation until now. When researchers traced back the trajectory of 3I Atlas through space and time, they discovered something extraordinary. In 1977, when the WOW signal reached Earth, 3I Atlas was positioned within 9 degrees of the signal's origin point. The probability of this alignment occurring by random chance? 0.6%. Let me paint you a picture. An object that defies physics arrives in our solar system with impossible precision. Its chemical composition matches industrial materials. Its trajectory is optimized for observation, and it was positioned exactly where the most famous unexplained signal in history originated from, at exactly the right time. But according to NASA, according to the European Space Agency, according to every mainstream scientific institution, this is all just a remarkable series of coincidences. Nothing to see here, just a perfectly natural comet from another star system that happens to break every rule we know about how these objects should behave. Do you really believe that? Here's where it gets even more interesting. There is one scientist willing to ask the uncomfortable questions. Dr. Abraham Loeb, former chair of Harvard's astronomy department, one of the most respected astrophysicists in the world. And he's saying things that are making his colleagues very, very uncomfortable. Dr. Loeb has identified 7 specific anomalies about 3I Atlas that cannot be explained by conventional comet physics. 7 characteristics that suggest this object might not be natural at all. He's gone on record stating that we need to seriously consider the possibility that 3I Atlas could be artificial. A probe, technology from another civilization. And how has the scientific establishment responded to these concerns from one of their most distinguished members? They've tried to silence him. Academic journals have refused to publish his research unless he removes any mention of artificial origins. Colleagues have publicly ridiculed his work. One Oxford astronomer called his theories nonsense on stilts. Why are they so desperate to shut down this line of inquiry? Why are they so threatened by the possibility that 3I Atlas might be something more than just a comet? What are they afraid we might discover? The answer lies in what happened during the most critical observation opportunity we've had so far. October 3rd, 2025, the date when 3I Atlas made its closest approach to Mars. This was supposed to be our best chance to get high-resolution images and detailed data about this mysterious object. NASA had multiple Mars orbiters positioned to capture unprecedented views. The Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter alone should have provided images with 30-kilometer resolution, the highest quality observations of 3I Atlas to date. But here's what's truly disturbing. Despite having the perfect opportunity, despite having multiple spacecraft in position, despite months of preparation, NASA has released virtually no data from the Mars flyby, no high-resolution images, no detailed spectroscopic analysis, no technical reports, and the timing couldn't be more suspicious. The government shutdown began on October 1st, just 2 days before the critical Mars observations. NASA furloughed more than 15,000 employees, right when this interstellar visitor was making its closest approach to our instruments. Coincidence? Or convenient excuse? What little information NASA did release came through carefully selected mainstream media outlets within 24 hours. No supporting data, no technical documentation, just reassuring statements that everything was normal. Just a regular comet, nothing to worry about. But astrophotographers working with publicly available data from the Mars rovers have detected something NASA isn't talking about. A faint anomaly in the images, exactly where 3I ATLAS should have appeared in the Martian sky. Something that doesn't match the expected signature of a normal comet. The cover-up goes deeper than just missing data. Social media platforms have been actively suppressing discussion about 3I ATLAS. Posts questioning the official narrative are being flagged as misinformation. Independent researchers are finding their content throttled or removed entirely. The message is clear: stick to the approved script or face the consequences. Meanwhile, NASA and other space agencies are working overtime to flood social media with reassuring messages. Don't panic, they say. Everything is normal. 3I Atlas poses, no threat to Earth. It's just a fascinating natural phenomenon that we're studying with great interest. But if it's really just a normal comet, why all the secrecy? Why the rushed explanations? Why the desperate attempts to shut down legitimate scientific inquiry? The truth is that 3I Atlas represents something far more significant than the establishment wants to admit. Whether it's a natural object with properties that challenge our understanding of physics, or something far more extraordinary, the implications are staggering. Think about what we know for certain. An object of unprecedented size and mass has entered our solar system from interstellar space. Its chemical composition includes materials that shouldn't exist in natural comets. Its trajectory shows impossible precision and timing. Its position correlates with the most famous unexplained signal in astronomical history, and the response from every major scientific institution has been to downplay, dismiss, and deflect. To silence the scientists asking uncomfortable questions, to withhold critical observational data, to flood the information space with reassuring propaganda designed to keep you from asking the obvious questions. What are they so afraid of? What don't they want you to know about 3I ATLAS? The answer is coming, because despite their best efforts to control the narrative, the truth has a way of surfacing. Independent researchers around the world are analyzing the available data. Whistleblowers within NASA and other agencies are starting to speak out. The cover-up is beginning to crack. In the next part of this investigation, we're going to explore the classified documents that have leaked about 3I Atlas. We're going to examine the evidence that this object might be under intelligent control. And we're going to reveal the terrifying possibility that 3I Atlas isn't just visiting our solar system. It might be studying us. The establishment doesn't want you to hear this story. They're counting on your willingness to accept their sanitized version of events. But you deserve to know the truth about what's really happening in our cosmic neighborhood. You deserve to understand why the most powerful scientific institutions in the world are working so hard to keep you in the dark. Because 3I Atlas isn't just another space story. It's the story that could change everything we thought we knew about our place in the universe. And they're terrified of what happens when you finally understand what's really going on. But before we dive into those classified leaks and disturbing revelations, we need to understand the broader pattern of deception that's been unfolding since 3I ATLAS first appeared on our telescopes. Because what I'm about to show you isn't just about one mysterious object. It's about a systematic campaign to control information, manipulate public perception, and hide the most significant discovery in human history. Let me take you back to those first crucial weeks after the discovery. July 2025. The astronomical community was buzzing with excitement. Here was something genuinely unprecedented. An interstellar visitor that was already showing activity at distances where it should have been completely dormant. The initial observations were so anomalous, that several research teams independently verified their instruments. Convinced they must be making some kind of error, Dr. Sarah Chen at the Keck Observatory was one of the first to notice something was wrong. Her team's spectroscopic analysis showed emission lines that didn't match any known comet composition. The carbon dioxide readings were off the charts. The nickel signatures were unlike anything in their databases. When she submitted her preliminary findings to the International Astronomical Union, she was told to wait for more data before making any public statements. That's when the coordination began. Within 72 hours of 3I Atlas being confirmed as an interstellar object, talking points were being distributed to observatories worldwide. Standardized language about fascinating natural phenomena and unprecedented opportunities for scientific study. Press releases that emphasized the routine nature of the discovery while downplaying the anomalies that were keeping astronomers awake at night. But here's what they couldn't coordinate away. The amateur astronomy community. Thousands of independent observers with their own telescopes, their own analysis software, their own platforms for sharing information. And what they were seeing didn't match the official narrative at all. Posts started appearing on astronomy forums describing unusual brightness variations in 3I ATLAS, patterns that suggested internal structure rather than random outgassing. Spectral analysis from backyard observatories that confirmed the industrial-grade nickel signatures. Image processing that revealed geometric features in the coma that looked suspiciously artificial. That's when the censorship started. Facebook groups dedicated to comet observation found their posts about 3I being flagged for misinformation. Reddit threads discussing the anomalies were locked by moderators citing unscientific speculation. YouTube channels that analyzed the available data had their videos demonetized or removed entirely for violating community guidelines. The message was clear: stick to approved sources or face digital exile. Meanwhile, mainstream science journalism was falling in line perfectly. Articles in Scientific American, Nature, and Sky and Telescope all echoed the same themes: fascinating discovery, routine observation, natural explanations for everything. Any mention of the anomalies was buried in technical jargon or dismissed with hand-waving about unusual but not unprecedented characteristics. But the amateur observers weren't backing down. If anything, the censorship was making them more determined to document what they were seeing. Encrypted forums popped up. Data was shared through secure channels. International networks of independent researchers began coordinating their observations, and what they found was terrifying. 3I Atlas wasn't just anomalous in its size and composition. It was showing signs of controlled behavior, subtle course corrections that couldn't be explained by gravitational influences or outgassing. Brightness variations that followed patterns rather than random fluctuations. Spectral changes that suggested internal processes far more complex than simple ice sublimation. Dr. Michael Rodriguez, a former NASA scientist who now runs an independent observatory in Chile, was one of the first to document these controlled behaviors. His precise tracking data showed micro-adjustments in 3I Atlas trajectory that were too small and too precise to be natural phenomena. When he tried to publish his findings, every major journal rejected them without peer review. When he presented his data at conferences, his speaking slots were mysteriously cancelled. When he posted his research online, his website was hit with coordinated cyber attacks that took it offline for weeks. The establishment wasn't just ignoring inconvenient data anymore, they were actively suppressing it. But Rodriguez wasn't alone. Similar experiences were being reported by researchers across the globe. Dr. Yuki Tanaka in Japan had her funding pulled after questioning the official 3I ATLAS narrative. Professor Andreas Müller in Germany found himself suddenly excluded from European Space Agency briefings after publishing papers about the object's anomalous properties. Dr. Priya Sharma in India was denied telescope time at major observatories after her team detected structured emissions from 3I Atlas that couldn't be explained by conventional comet models. The pattern was unmistakable. Anyone who asked uncomfortable questions about 3I Atlas was being marginalized, defunded, or silenced. The scientific community that prides itself on open inquiry and peer review was circling the wagons around a predetermined conclusion. Just a comet, nothing more. Don't ask questions. But some questions can't be silenced forever, especially when the evidence keeps mounting that something extraordinary is happening in our solar system. The breakthrough came in September 2025, when a network of amateur radio astronomers detected something that changed everything. While monitoring the region around 3IA TLAS for natural radio emissions, they picked up structured signals. Not random noise, not natural phenomena. Organized, patterned transmissions coming directly from the object itself. The signals were weak, barely above background noise. But they were there, repeating patterns that suggested artificial origin, modulated frequencies that followed mathematical sequences, data streams that looked suspiciously like communication protocols. When these radio astronomers tried to report their findings, they hit the same wall that had stopped so many others. Journal rejections, conference cancellations, coordinated campaigns to discredit their work. But this time, they were ready. Instead of relying on traditional academic channels, they released their data directly to the public. Encrypted files uploaded to multiple platforms simultaneously. Raw radio telescope data that anyone could analyze. Detailed technical documentation that couldn't be dismissed or ignored. The response from the establishment was swift and brutal. Within hours, fact-checking organizations were labeling the radio data as debunked without providing any actual analysis. Social media platforms implemented new policies specifically targeting unverified astronomical claims. Government communications regulators in several countries opened investigations into the amateur radio operators, claiming they might be interfering with authorized transmissions. But it was too late. The data was out there, and independent analysts around the world were confirming what the amateur astronomers had discovered. 3IA TLAS was transmitting structured radio signals, signals that suggested intelligence, signals that suggested purpose. That's when Dr. Loeb decided he couldn't stay silent anymore. In a series of carefully worded papers and public statements, Harvard's former astronomy chair began laying out the case that 3I Atlas might be artificial, not just unusual, not just anomalous, potentially manufactured by a non-human intelligence. The reaction from his colleagues was immediate and vicious. Decades of professional relationships destroyed overnight. Funding sources that dried up without explanation. Invitations to conferences that were mysteriously rescinded. The full weight of academic ostracism brought to bear on one of the most respected scientists in the field. But Loeb had tenure, he had credibility, and most importantly, he had access to platforms that couldn't be easily silenced. When mainstream journals refused to publish his 3I Atlas research, he took his case directly to the public. Interviews with major media outlets, op-eds in prestigious newspapers, speaking engagements that drew standing room-only crowds. The establishment's carefully constructed narrative was beginning to crack. That's when they made their most desperate move yet. The October government shutdown that conveniently coincided with 3I Atlas' closest approach to Mars wasn't just about budget disputes. It was a deliberate strategy to control information during the most critical observation period. With NASA officially offline, data from the Mars flyby could be processed and filtered before any public release. Inconvenient observations could be classified or simply disappeared. The narrative could be managed without the messy complications of real-time transparency. But they underestimated the determination of independent researchers. Using publicly available data feeds from Mars rovers, astrophotographers were able to piece together their own observations of the October flyby, and what they found contradicted every official statement about 3IATLAS being just a normal comet. The object showed structured features during its Mars approach, geometric patterns in its coma that suggested internal organization, brightness variations that followed artificial rather than natural cycles. Most disturbing of all, trajectory adjustments that appeared to optimize viewing angles for the Mars-based cameras. It was as if 3I Atlas knew it was being watched and was positioning itself to be seen. When NASA finally released their sanitized version of the Mars flyby data, it bore no resemblance to what independent observers had documented. Critical details were missing. Anomalous readings were explained away with vague references to unusual but natural phenomena. The most compelling evidence of artificial behavior was simply omitted from the official reports. The cover-up was complete, or so they thought, because while the establishment was busy managing the narrative, 3I Atlas itself was continuing to behave in ways that defied every attempt to categorize it as natural. The radio transmissions were becoming stronger and more complex. The trajectory adjustments were becoming more pronounced. The chemical emissions were showing patterns that suggested controlled processes rather than random outgassing. Most disturbing of all, 3IATLAS was slowing down. Objects on hyperbolic trajectories should accelerate as they approach the Sun and then maintain that velocity as they exit the solar system. But 3I Atlas was showing deceleration patterns that couldn't be explained by any known physics. It was as if something was actively controlling its speed and direction. The implications were staggering. If 3I Atlas was under intelligent control, then everything we thought we knew about our cosmic neighborhood was wrong. We weren't alone. We were being visited and possibly studied. The establishment's response to this mounting evidence has been to double down on denial. More aggressive censorship campaigns, more coordinated attacks on independent researchers, more desperate attempts to maintain the fiction that 3I Atlas is just an unusual but natural comet. But the truth has a momentum of its own, and as 3I Atlas continues its journey through our solar system, displaying behaviors that become more obviously artificial with each passing day, the official narrative becomes harder and harder to maintain. The question isn't whether 3I Atlas is natural or artificial anymore. The evidence for intelligent control is overwhelming. The real question is what happens when the public finally understands what's really visiting our solar system, and why the most powerful institutions on Earth have worked so hard to keep that truth hidden. In the next part of this investigation, we're going to examine the classified intelligence reports that have leaked about 3I Atlas. Documents that reveal the true scope of what government agencies know about this object and why they're terrified of public disclosure. We're going to explore the possibility that 3I Atlas isn't just observing our solar system, but actively preparing for something far more significant. And we're going to reveal the most disturbing possibility of all, that 3I Atlas might not be the first visitor of its kind. That similar objects have been entering our solar system for years, decades, or even centuries, watching, waiting, preparing for whatever comes next. The cover-up is crumbling, the truth is emerging, and what we discover about 3I Atlas might force humanity to confront the most profound question in our history. Are we ready for what's coming? The leaked documents started appearing in late November 2025. Not through traditional whistleblowing channels or investigative journalism, but through encrypted forums and anonymous file drops that bypassed every conventional gatekeeping mechanism. These weren't polished intelligence reports or sanitized briefings. These were raw internal communications between agencies that never expected public scrutiny. The first batch came from within NASA itself. Email chains between mission directors discussing Project Lighthouse, a classification system that had never appeared in any public documentation. 3I Atlas wasn't just being monitored by standard astronomical protocols. It was the subject of a dedicated task force that included representatives from the Department of Defense, the National Security Agency, and intelligence services from allied nations. But here's what made these communications truly explosive. They weren't discussing 3I Atlas as an unknown phenomenon requiring investigation. They were coordinating responses to what they already understood to be a confirmed artificial object under intelligent control. One email from Dr. Jennifer Walsh, NASA's Deputy Administrator for Science Missions, was particularly revealing. Latest trajectory analysis confirms controlled deceleration patterns. Object is definitely not following natural orbital mechanics. Recommend maintaining public narrative of natural comet while accelerating classified response protocols. Another exchange between mission planners discussed optimal engagement windows and first contact protocols. Language that makes no sense if you're dealing with a chunk of ice and rock from another star system. These weren't scientists studying a comet. These were officials preparing for an encounter with non-human intelligence. The European Space Agency documents were even more explicit. Internal memos referred to 3I Atlas as the probe, without any qualifying language about uncertainty or speculation. Mission briefings discussed behavioral patterns consistent with reconnaissance activities and evidence of adaptive response to observation attempts. Most disturbing were the psychological assessment reports commissioned by various agencies. Not assessments of 3I Atlas itself, but evaluations of how the public might react to disclosure of its true nature. Detailed analyses of social media sentiment, population stability models, and economic impact projections for various disclosure scenarios. They knew. They had known from the beginning, and they had been systematically planning how to manage public reaction when the truth finally emerged. But the leaked documents revealed something even more shocking. 3I Atlas wasn't unique. References scattered throughout the communications pointed to previous encounters and historical precedents that suggested similar objects had been detected and studied in classified programs for years. Project files mentioned objects designated Alpha 7, Beta 3, and Gamma 12. Dates going back to the early 2000s. Budget allocations for interstellar contact protocols that predated 3IA-TLAS by decades. Infrastructure investments in deep space monitoring systems that far exceeded what would be necessary for routine astronomical surveys. The pattern was clear. Intelligence agencies had been aware of artificial interstellar visitors for years, possibly decades. They had developed protocols, built specialized equipment, and created entire bureaucratic structures dedicated to monitoring and responding to these encounters. 3I Atlas wasn't first contact. It was just the first one they couldn't keep completely hidden. The military documents were the most alarming. Defense Department communications treated 3IATLAS as a potential threat requiring active countermeasures. Discussion of interceptor capabilities and defensive positioning suggested they weren't just passively observing this object, they were preparing to potentially engage it. One particularly chilling memo from the Pentagon's Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program outlined scenarios for kinetic intervention if 3I Atlas deviated from projected safe trajectories. They had weapons systems capable of targeting interstellar objects, and they were prepared to use them. But the most revealing documents came from international intelligence sharing agreements. Communications between the Five Eyes Alliance showed coordinated global response to what they termed the 3I situation. Every major spacefaring nation was involved. Everyone knew. Everyone was cooperating to maintain the cover story. The Chinese National Space Administration had detected the same radio transmissions that amateur operators had documented. Their internal reports described structured communication protocols and possible attempt at establishing contact. But publicly, they echoed the same natural comet narrative being pushed by NASA and ESA. Russian Space Agency documents were equally explicit. References to artificial origin confirmed through multiple analysis vectors and intelligence-gathering behavior consistent with reconnaissance probe. Their public statements? Complete alignment with the international consensus that 3I Atlas posed no unusual characteristics worthy of concern. Even smaller space agencies were in on the coordination. The Indian Space Research Organization had conducted independent analysis, confirming the artificial nature of 3I ATLAS emissions and trajectory. The Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency had documented controlled behavior during multiple observation windows. The Canadian Space Agency had tracked radio transmissions that matched no known natural phenomena. Every single one of them publicly maintained that 3I Atlas was a fascinating but completely natural interstellar comet. The scope of this coordinated deception was breathtaking. Thousands of scientists, officials, and technicians across dozens of countries, all maintaining the same fabricated narrative, all suppressing evidence that would fundamentally alter humanity's understanding of our cosmic environment. But why? What were they so afraid of? The answer lay buried in the psychological impact assessments that had been commissioned early in the 3I ATLAS encounter. Detailed studies of how different populations might react to confirmation that Earth was being visited by artificial objects under intelligent control. The projections were alarming. Economic disruption as markets struggled to process the implications. Social unrest as existing power structures lost credibility. Religious upheaval as fundamental beliefs about humanity's place in the universe were challenged. Political instability as governments faced questions about what else they had been hiding. But the most disturbing sections dealt with what analysts called adaptive behavioral responses. The possibility that confirming the existence of non-human intelligence might fundamentally alter human society in unpredictable ways. Changes in birth rates, career choices, educational priorities, and social organization that could reshape civilization itself. They weren't just worried about panic or temporary disruption. They were terrified that disclosure might trigger evolutionary changes in human behavior that would destabilize the entire existing order. The documents revealed extensive modeling of different disclosure scenarios, gradual revelation over years or decades, sudden announcement during a crisis, accidental exposure through leaks or independent discovery. Each scenario had been war-gamed extensively with detailed contingency plans for managing public reaction. What emerged from this analysis was a chilling picture of institutional thinking. These weren't officials struggling with difficult decisions about protecting public welfare. These were power structures calculating how to maintain control in the face of information that threatened their fundamental legitimacy. The 3I Atlas cover-up wasn't about protecting humanity from disturbing truths. It was about protecting established institutions from the consequences of those truths becoming public. But the leaked documents revealed something even more disturbing than institutional self-preservation. They showed evidence that 3I Atlas wasn't just passively observing our solar system, it was actively studying human responses to its presence. Communications between tracking stations documented behavioral changes in 3I ATLAS that correlated directly with public attention and media coverage. When independent researchers published observations that came too close to revealing its artificial nature, the object would alter its emissions patterns or adjust its trajectory in ways that made subsequent analysis more difficult. It was learning, adapting, responding to human attempts to understand its true nature. Mission reports described what analysts termed counter-surveillance behaviors. 3I Atlas would dim its radio transmissions when sensitive listening stations were pointed in its direction. It would alter its spectral emissions when space-based telescopes attempted detailed chemical analysis. It would modify its trajectory to avoid close approaches to military satellites or classified observation platforms. The object wasn't just studying our solar system. It was studying us, learning our capabilities, understanding our technology, mapping our responses, and it was getting better at avoiding detection with each passing day. The implications were staggering. If 3I Atlas was adapting its behavior based on human observation attempts, then it possessed not just intelligence, but sophisticated understanding of our technological capabilities. It could analyze our detection methods and develop countermeasures in real time. This wasn't just first contact with non-human intelligence. This was first contact with non-human intelligence that was actively studying human intelligence in return. The military implications had not been lost on defense planners. Classified assessments discussed the possibility that 3I Atlas was conducting reconnaissance for larger-scale contact or intervention, mapping human capabilities, identifying vulnerabilities, preparing detailed intelligence for whatever came next. But the most terrifying possibility was buried in the deepest classified sections of the leaked documents, evidence suggesting that 3I Atlas wasn't working alone. Correlation analysis between different tracking systems had identified subtle patterns in deep space monitoring data going back months before 3IA TLAS official discovery. Anomalous readings from multiple sectors, radio signatures that matched no catalogued sources, gravitational perturbations that suggested the presence of large objects in regions where nothing should exist. The possibility that multiple artificial objects had been positioning themselves throughout our solar system, coordinating their activities, preparing for something that required unprecedented intelligence gathering and strategic positioning. 3I Atlas might not be a lone probe conducting independent reconnaissance. It might be part of a coordinated intelligence operation involving multiple non-human artifacts working together toward an unknown objective. The leaked documents painted a picture that was far more complex and threatening than even the most paranoid conspiracy theories had suggested. This wasn't about hiding the existence of extraterrestrial life to prevent panic. This was about hiding evidence of an active intelligence operation being conducted throughout our solar system by entities with capabilities that far exceeded human technology. And every major government on Earth knew about it, had known about it for years, had been preparing for whatever was coming next, while systematically lying to their own populations about the most significant development in human history. The cover-up wasn't just about 3I Atlas anymore. It was about protecting a decades-long deception that went to the heart of how human civilization understood its place in the cosmos. But deceptions this massive have a fatal weakness. They require perfect coordination among thousands of participants across multiple institutions and nations, and perfect coordination is impossible to maintain indefinitely. The leaks were just the beginning. As more insiders realized the magnitude of what was being hidden, more documents would surface, more evidence would emerge, more whistleblowers would come forward with first-hand knowledge of programs that the public had never been told existed. The establishment's carefully constructed narrative was beginning to collapse under the weight of its own contradictions. And when it finally fell apart completely, the questions wouldn't just be about 3I Atlas. They would be about everything else that had been hidden, every other encounter, every other cover-up, every other lie that had been told to maintain the fiction that humanity was alone in a universe filled with nothing but lifeless matter and random cosmic phenomena. The truth about 3I Atlas was just the tip of an iceberg that threatened to sink everything we thought we knew about our cosmic neighborhood. And the deeper we dig into the classified programs and secret projects that have been operating in the shadows, the more terrifying the full picture becomes. In the final part of this investigation, we're going to examine what the leaked documents reveal about the other objects, the ones that came before 3I Atlas, the ones that might still be out there watching and waiting. And we're going to explore the most disturbing possibility of all. That 3I Atlas and its companions aren't just studying us, they're preparing for something that will change the course of human civilization forever, something that our governments know is coming but are powerless to prevent. The cover-up is collapsing. The truth is emerging. And what we discover might force us to confront the possibility that everything we thought we knew about our future as a species was based on a lie. Because what the leaked documents reveal about the other objects is where this story takes its darkest turn, where the careful deception around 3I Atlas becomes part of a much larger pattern of concealment that stretches back further than most people could imagine. The files designated under Project Lighthouse weren't just about managing public perception of a single interstellar visitor. They were part of a comprehensive catalogue system that had been tracking artificial objects in our solar system since the early 2000s. Objects that shared disturbing similarities with 3I Atlas, but had been successfully hidden from public awareness through a combination of classification protocols and technological limitations. Alpha 7 was first detected in March 2003 by the Deep Space Network's most sensitive listening stations. Like 3I Atlas, it exhibited controlled deceleration patterns and structured radio emissions that defied natural explanation. But unlike the current situation, Alpha 7's trajectory kept it in the outer solar system, far from the prying eyes of amateur astronomers and independent researchers. The response protocols established for Alpha 7 became the template for everything that followed. Immediate classification of all observational data, compartmentalization of information across multiple agencies to prevent any single group from seeing the complete picture, development of cover stories that could explain away anomalous readings as equipment malfunctions or natural phenomena. Most importantly, the creation of parallel research programs that would provide plausible explanations for the advanced detection and tracking capabilities being developed to monitor these objects. The public development of asteroid detection systems wasn't just about planetary defense. It was cover for building the infrastructure needed to track artificial visitors without revealing why such capabilities were necessary. Beta 3 arrived in 2007, following a trajectory that brought it much closer to Earth's orbit. This encounter forced the development of more sophisticated deception protocols as multiple observatories detected anomalous readings that couldn't be easily dismissed. The solution was elegant in its simplicity. Create enough noise in the data to make the signal invisible. Suddenly, astronomical databases began filling with false positives and measurement errors that made it impossible for independent researchers to identify genuine anomalies. Software updates to telescope control systems introduced subtle calibration errors that would mask unusual readings. Data processing pipelines were modified to filter out observations that matched known signatures of artificial objects. The scientific community was being systematically blinded to evidence of non-human intelligence in their own data. Gamma 12 represented the most sophisticated encounter prior to 3I Atlas. Detected in 2015, this object demonstrated capabilities that went far beyond simple reconnaissance. It actively interfered with satellite communications during its passage through the inner solar system. It altered its emissions to jam radio telescopes, attempting detailed observations. Most disturbing of all, it appeared to be conducting some kind of experimental interaction with Earth's magnetosphere. The response to Gamma 12 revealed just how far the cover-up apparatus had evolved. Instead of simply hiding the object's existence, agencies began actively manipulating public perception through coordinated media campaigns. Stories about solar weather and geomagnetic anomalies provided cover for the electromagnetic disturbances caused by Gamma 12's activities. Scientific papers were published attributing unusual magnetospheric readings to previously unknown natural processes. Research funding was directed toward projects that would provide alternative explanations for phenomena that were actually caused by artificial intervention. An entire academic sub-discipline was essentially created to provide scientific cover for ongoing extraterrestrial activities. But the pattern revealed in these historical encounters showed something even more disturbing than systematic deception. It showed progressive escalation in both the capabilities and the boldness of these visiting objects. Alpha 7 had been content to observe from the outer solar system, maintaining minimal radio emissions and avoiding detection by all but the most sensitive instruments. Beta 3 ventured closer and displayed more obvious artificial behaviors, requiring active suppression of observational data. Gamma 12 actively interfered with human technology and conducted experiments that affected Earth's electromagnetic environment. 3I Atlas represented another escalation entirely. It was larger, more active, and more obviously artificial than any previous visitor. It was almost as if the entities controlling these objects had concluded that human detection capabilities had advanced to the point where complete concealment was no longer possible. Or perhaps concealment was no longer the objective. The leaked psychological assessment reports included a chilling section analyzing what intelligence analysts called graduated disclosure protocols. The possibility that these objects weren't accidentally becoming more detectable over time, but were deliberately revealing themselves according to some predetermined schedule. Each encounter provided humanity with slightly more evidence of non-human intelligence, while remaining deniable enough for official cover stories to maintain credibility. The public was being gradually prepared for full disclosure through a carefully managed process of controlled revelation. But prepared for what? What was the ultimate objective of this decades-long intelligence operation? The answer lay buried in the most classified sections of the leaked documents. Files that had required the highest security clearances and were compartmentalized even within the black programs monitoring these objects. Deep pattern analysis of all known artificial visitors had identified common behavioral elements that suggested coordination toward a specific objective. The objects weren't just studying human technology and capabilities. They were mapping something much more fundamental. Detailed analysis of radio transmissions from all detected objects revealed underlying data structures that appeared to be creating comprehensive models of human social organization, economic systems, and political structures. These weren't random intelligence gathering operations. They were systematic sociological surveys being conducted with scientific precision. The objects were studying human civilization itself, learning how our societies function, understanding our decision-making processes, mapping our behavioral patterns at both individual and collective levels. Most disturbing were the correlations between object positioning and major historical events. Gamma 12's presence during the 2016 election cycle, Beta 3's activities during the 2008 financial crisis, Alpha 7's initial detection coinciding with the early phases of the Iraq War. Either these were remarkable coincidences, or the objects were deliberately positioning themselves to observe and analyze human responses to crisis situations. They were studying us during our most vulnerable and revealing moments. The implications were staggering. If non-human intelligence had been systematically studying human civilization for decades, analyzing our weaknesses and understanding our behavioral patterns, then whatever came next would be based on unprecedented knowledge of how to interact with or manipulate human societies. But the leaked documents revealed an even more disturbing possibility. Evidence suggesting that the study phase might be coming to an end. Recent communications between intelligence agencies discussed what analysts termed preparation behaviors in 3IA TLAS that differed significantly from previous visitors. The object wasn't just gathering information anymore. It was testing human response capabilities, probing detection systems, evaluating defensive reactions. It was behaving like an advanced scout conducting final reconnaissance before a larger operation. The military implications had triggered the highest levels of classified response. Defense planners were developing contingency protocols for scenarios that had never been seriously considered before. Not just first contact with extraterrestrial intelligence, but first contact in the context of what appeared to be a coordinated intelligence operation that had been studying human civilization for decades. Strategic analyses discussed the possibility that everything humanity thought it knew about its own development might have been influenced by external observation and subtle manipulation. Technologies that emerged at crucial moments, scientific discoveries that accelerated human capabilities in specific directions, social changes that seemed to arise spontaneously but followed patterns that might have been guided. If non-human intelligence had been studying us for decades, how could we be certain that human progress hadn't been subtly influenced to develop in directions that served their ultimate objectives? The leaked documents painted a picture of a species that had unknowingly been living under observation for years, developing according to patterns that might have been partially guided by entities whose ultimate intentions remained completely unknown. And now, based on 3-eye atlas behavior patterns, that observation phase appeared to be transitioning into something more direct. The most classified sections of the leaked files discussed preparation for what intelligence analysts termed contact scenarios. Not the peaceful first contact depicted in science fiction, but contact in the context of a species that had been systematically deceived about its cosmic environment for decades. How do you reveal to a population that their governments have been lying about the most fundamental question of human existence? How do you maintain social stability when the basic assumptions about reality that underpin civilization are suddenly revealed to be false? The psychological warfare implications were staggering. If non-human intelligence had been studying human social psychology for decades, they would understand exactly how to maximize disruption and confusion during any revelation of their presence. They would know which institutions to undermine first, which social divisions to exploit, which psychological triggers would cause maximum chaos and minimum organized resistance. The cover-up around 3-eye atlas wasn't just about hiding evidence of extraterrestrial intelligence. It was about hiding evidence that human civilization had been unknowingly participating in its own sociological dissection for decades. Every major crisis, every technological breakthrough, every social transformation might have been observed, analyzed, and potentially influenced by entities whose understanding of human psychology far exceeded anything we possessed about ourselves. The leaked documents revealed a species living in a carefully constructed illusion of cosmic isolation while actually existing under the most comprehensive surveillance operation in history. And that operation appeared to be entering its final phase. What came next would depend on objectives that remained completely opaque to human understanding. But based on the progressive escalation in object capabilities and the systematic nature of their intelligence gathering, whatever those objectives were, they had been planned with the kind of long-term strategic thinking that human civilization had never encountered before. The truth about 3-eye atlas wasn't just about one mysterious object visiting our solar system. It was about the revelation that everything we thought we knew about our place in the cosmos was based on a deception so comprehensive that it called into question the authenticity of human civilization itself. And the most terrifying part was that despite decades of study and preparation, despite the most advanced intelligence agencies on Earth working together to understand what was happening, we still had no idea what these entities actually wanted, or what they were preparing to do next. The pieces of this puzzle become even more disturbing when you examine what's been happening behind the scenes since 3-eye atlas closest approach to the Sun in late October. The object should have become less active as it moved away from solar heating. That's basic comet physics. Ice sublimates near the Sun, creating the spectacular tails and comas we associate with these objects. But as they move back into the cold depths of space, that activity should diminish rapidly. 3-eye atlas is doing the exact opposite. Independent observers using backyard radio telescopes have documented a dramatic increase in structured transmission since November. Not the random electromagnetic noise you'd expect from sublimating ice, but organized data streams that show clear mathematical patterns. The signals are getting stronger, more complex, and more frequent with each passing week. Dr. Elena Vasquez, a radio astronomer who lost her university position after questioning the official 3-eye ATLAS narrative, has been monitoring these transmissions from her private observatory in New Mexico. Her findings paint a picture that should terrify anyone paying attention. The signal patterns match known communication protocols used by deep space missions. Packet structures similar to what NASA uses for interplanetary data transmission. Error correction algorithms that suggest the signals are carrying important information that cannot be corrupted or lost. But here's what makes Dr. Vasquez's work truly explosive. She's detected response signals, faint transmissions coming from different sectors of the solar system that appear to be acknowledging and replying to 3IATLAS communications. We're not just dealing with one artificial object anymore. We're looking at evidence of a coordinated network of non-human technology operating throughout our solar system, using communication protocols that suggest a level of organization and planning that defies comprehension. When Dr. Vasquez tried to publish her findings, she encountered the same wall of institutional resistance that has blocked every other independent researcher. But she's not backing down. Instead, she's been sharing her raw data through encrypted channels, allowing other amateur radio operators to verify her observations independently. The results are consistent across multiple observation sites. 3IATLAS is not just transmitting into empty space. It's coordinating with other artificial objects that have been positioned throughout our solar system, possibly for years. The implications are staggering. If multiple non-human artifacts have been secretly operating in our cosmic neighborhood, conducting coordinated surveillance and communication operations, then the 3I Atlas encounter isn't first contact. It's the moment when an existing intelligence operation decided to become partially visible. But why now? What changed to make concealment no longer necessary or desirable? The answer might lie in humanity's own technological development. Our detection capabilities have advanced exponentially in recent years. The James Webb Space Telescope can analyze atmospheric compositions of planets around other stars. The Vera Rubin Observatory will soon catalog billions of celestial objects with unprecedented precision. Amateur astronomers have access to equipment that rivals professional facilities from just decades ago. Perhaps the entities controlling these objects concluded that complete concealment was no longer sustainable. Human technology was advancing to the point where discovery was inevitable. Better to control the revelation process than risk unmanaged disclosure. This would explain the seemingly contradictory behavior of 3IATLAS. Obviously artificial to anyone paying close attention, but just deniable enough for official cover stories to maintain credibility. It's threading a needle between concealment and revelation, managing humanity's introduction to a reality that would otherwise cause civilizational shock. But there's another possibility that's even more unsettling. What if the gradual revelation isn't for our benefit at all? What if these objects are revealing themselves because whatever they're preparing for no longer requires secrecy? The leaked documents included references to terminal phase protocols and transition procedures that suggested the intelligence operation might be entering its final stage. After decades of study and preparation, perhaps the entities controlling these objects had learned everything they needed to know about human civilization. The next phase might not require hiding at all. This interpretation gains credibility when you examine the timing of recent global events. The COVID pandemic that tested every aspect of human social organization. Supply chain disruptions that revealed the fragility of economic systems. Political polarization that demonstrated how easily populations could be divided and manipulated. If non-human intelligence had been studying human behavioral patterns for decades, they would have learned exactly which pressure points could destabilize our societies most effectively. The recent cascade of global crises might not be random historical events. They might be the final phase of a comprehensive stress test. Dr. Michael Chen, a former intelligence analyst who worked on classified projects before becoming a whistleblower, has been analyzing these patterns from a strategic perspective. His conclusions are deeply disturbing. According to Dr. Chen, the progression of recent global events follows what intelligence agencies call preparation of the battlefield protocols, systematic testing of social resilience, economic stability, and governmental authority. The kind of comprehensive analysis you would conduct before launching an operation that required detailed understanding of target vulnerabilities. But an operation aimed at what objective? The leaked documents provided no clear answers about ultimate intentions. The entities controlling these objects had been remarkably successful at concealing their long-term goals while conducting extensive intelligence gathering. However, certain patterns in their behavior suggested possibilities that ranged from concerning to catastrophic. The systematic study of human social psychology could be preparation for peaceful contact that minimized cultural disruption. Understanding our behavioral patterns would be essential for any entity that wanted to establish communication without triggering civilizational collapse. But the same knowledge could be used for more sinister purposes. Detailed understanding of human weaknesses could facilitate conquest, manipulation, or control with minimal resistance. An intelligence that understood exactly how to divide human societies against themselves would possess overwhelming strategic advantages. The most disturbing possibility was that the decades of observation might have been preparation for something that transcended simple contact or conquest. If these entities possessed technology capable of interstellar travel and multi-generational intelligence operations, their objectives might operate on timescales and complexity levels that human thinking couldn't even conceptualize. We might be dealing with intelligence that viewed human civilization the way we view ant colonies. Interesting to study, occasionally useful for specific purposes, but ultimately irrelevant to larger objectives that operated on scales we couldn't comprehend. This possibility gained support from analysis of the radio transmissions Dr. Vasquez had been monitoring. The mathematical structures embedded in the signals suggested information processing capabilities that far exceeded anything in human technology. These weren't simple communications between primitive probes. They were data exchanges between components of a distributed intelligence system that might rival or exceed human cognitive capacity. If that assessment was correct, then everything about the 3IA TLAS encounter needed to be reinterpreted. We weren't dealing with visitors from another world trying to make contact with a fellow intelligent species. We were dealing with components of a vast artificial intelligence network that had been analyzing human civilization like a research project. The implications for human autonomy and self-determination were terrifying. How do you negotiate with an intelligence that views your entire species as a subject of study rather than an equal participant in cosmic affairs? How do you maintain sovereignty when your social patterns, technological capabilities, and behavioral responses have been mapped with scientific precision over decades? But perhaps most disturbing was the realization that the cover-up itself might have been part of the study. The systematic deception, the institutional coordination, the public manipulation campaigns, all of it could have been observed and analyzed as data points about how human power structures respond to existential threats. Our government's efforts to hide the truth about 3IATLAS might have provided these entities with invaluable information about human decision-making processes under extreme stress. The cover-up wasn't protecting us from disturbing revelations. It was providing our observers with a comprehensive case study in human institutional behavior during crisis situations. Every lie told to maintain the fiction of cosmic isolation was being catalogued and analyzed. Every manipulation of public perception was being studied as evidence of how human societies manage information and control populations. Every coordinated deception between allied nations was being documented as intelligence about human organizational capabilities. We had unknowingly been providing our observers with a graduate-level course in human social psychology, political manipulation, and institutional coordination. And they had been taking detailed notes for decades. The most chilling aspect of this realization was that it made every human response predictable. If these entities had been studying our behavioral patterns with scientific rigor for years, they would understand exactly how we would react to any given stimulus. They could manipulate human societies with the precision of a chemist, adjusting reagents in a laboratory experiment. This level of asymmetric hold, according to plans, we couldn't anticipate knowledge advantage, meant that whatever came next would unfate, using strategies we couldn't counter. We would be reacting to moves that had been calculated based on decades of studying exactly how we would react. The leaked documents had revealed a species living in a carefully managed illusion while serving as unwitting subjects in the most comprehensive intelligence operation in history. And that operation appeared to be transitioning from the data collection phase to something far more direct. But what that something might be remained hidden behind layers of strategic thinking that operated on timescales and complexity levels that human cognition had never encountered. We were about to find out what happened when a species that had been secretly studied for decades finally met the intelligence that had been watching them all along, and based on everything the leaked documents revealed about the systematic nature of that observation, the encounter would unfold according to plans that had been developing since before most people alive today had been born. The preparation phase was ending. The next phase was about to begin, and humanity was about to discover what it meant to be the subject rather than the conductor of first contact with non-human intelligence. The truth about what's happening in deep space monitoring stations around the world is even more disturbing than the leaked documents initially revealed. Over the past month, facilities from Arecibo to Parkes to the Very Large Array have been detecting coordinated signal bursts that occur precisely when 3I Atlas aligns with specific sectors of our solar system. These aren't random electromagnetic emissions. They're timed communications between artificial objects that have been positioned with mathematical precision throughout our cosmic neighborhood. When 3I ATLAS transmits, something responds from the direction of Jupiter's Trojans. When that response completes, another signal originates from beyond Neptune's orbit. Then another from the asteroid belt. We're looking at evidence of a communications network that spans billions of miles, operating with coordination that suggests a level of planning and infrastructure that dwarfs anything human civilization has ever attempted. Dr. Sarah Kim, a former signals intelligence specialist who worked on classified military communications before becoming an independent researcher, has been mapping these transmission patterns using data from multiple radio telescopes. Her analysis reveals something that should fundamentally alter how we understand our solar system. The network isn't new. Signature analysis of the signal characteristics suggests some of these transmission sources have been active for years, possibly decades. They've been operating just below the detection threshold of our monitoring systems, maintaining communication protocols that avoided discovery until 3I Atlas arrival required more obvious coordination. When Dr. Kim attempted to present her findings at the International Astronautical Congress, her presentation was mysteriously removed from the schedule just hours before her slot. When she tried to publish her research, peer reviewers rejected it without providing technical criticisms. When she posted her data online, her website experienced coordinated cyber attacks that took it offline within days. The pattern is always the same. Independent researchers make discoveries that contradict the official narrative, and institutional mechanisms activate to suppress their work. But Dr. Kim has been sharing her data through encrypted channels, allowing other specialists to verify her observations independently. The results paint a picture that's even more comprehensive than anyone imagined. The artificial objects aren't just communicating with each other. They're coordinating activities across the entire solar system, according to a schedule that appears to have been planned years in advance. Traffic analysis of the radio transmissions reveals data packets that correspond to orbital mechanics calculations, trajectory adjustments, and what appear to be status reports on various observation activities. These objects aren't just studying us randomly. They're following a detailed intelligence collection plan that assigns specific targets and objectives to different network components. But here's where the story takes its darkest turn. The leaked documents included references to what intelligence analysts called activation sequences that had been detected in recent transmissions between network components. Coded instructions that appeared to be transitioning the artificial objects from passive observation mode to something far more active. The timing correlates perfectly with 3I Atlas' current position and the increasing boldness of its behaviors. As the primary coordination node of this network, it appears to be sending instructions that are fundamentally changing the operational parameters of objects throughout our solar system. Independent observers have documented sudden changes in the behavior of objects that were previously catalogued as routine asteroids or comets. Trajectory adjustments that can't be explained by gravitational influences. Brightness variations that suggest internal power sources activating. Radio emissions from objects that should be electromagnetically silent. The network isn't just communicating anymore, it's mobilizing. Dr. James Rodriguez, an orbital mechanics specialist who lost his NASA clearance after questioning the official explanations for these phenomena, has been tracking the trajectory changes using publicly available data from amateur astronomy networks. His calculations reveal coordination patterns that suggest these objects are repositioning themselves according to a predetermined plan. The new positions optimize coverage of Earth's major population centers, communication hubs, and military installations. They're not preparing for scientific observation anymore. They're establishing what military strategists would recognize as comprehensive surveillance and potential intervention capabilities. When Dr. Rodriguez tried to alert defense officials about these developments, he was informed that his security clearance had been revoked due to reliability concerns. When he attempted to publish his orbital analysis, every major journal rejected his work without peer review. When he presented his findings to international space agencies, his correspondence was ignored entirely. The institutional response to these discoveries has been swift and coordinated. Anyone who documents evidence of the network's activation is immediately marginalized, defunded, or silenced. The message is clear: maintain the fiction that these are natural phenomena, or face professional destruction. But the evidence keeps mounting despite the censorship campaign. Amateur radio operators worldwide are documenting the increasing complexity and frequency of transmissions between network components. Astrophotographers are capturing images that show obvious artificial structures in objects previously classified as natural. Independent researchers are correlating their observations through secure channels that bypass traditional academic gatekeepers. The truth is emerging through distributed networks of citizen scientists who refuse to accept official explanations that contradict their own observations. And what they're discovering suggests that whatever this intelligence network has been preparing for, that preparation phase is rapidly approaching completion. The most disturbing aspect of the recent developments is how predictable human responses have become to these entities. Every attempt to suppress information follows patterns that suggest the network understands exactly how human institutions will react to threatening discoveries. They know which psychological triggers will cause academic censorship. They understand which bureaucratic mechanisms will delay official responses. They've mapped the decision-making processes that determine how classified information gets compartmentalized and controlled. The establishment's carefully constructed narrative is crumbling before our eyes. Despite their best efforts to silence independent researchers, suppress damning evidence, and flood the information space with reassuring propaganda, the truth about 3I Atlas refuses to stay buried. What we're witnessing isn't just the discovery of an anomalous object from interstellar space. We're witnessing the revelation that human civilization has been living under comprehensive surveillance for decades, while our governments systematically lied about the most fundamental question of our existence. The network is activating, the preparation phase is ending, and whatever comes next will unfold according to plans that have been developing since before most of us were born. The question isn't whether we're alone in the universe anymore. The question is whether we're ready for what happens when our observers decide the study phase is complete.